Hello and welcome to another maintenance blog. This video is about the hull work we did, the epoxy, anti-fouling, a few repairs to the gel coat behind the chain plate, but mostly it's about how we raised the waterline. It's a job that most AML owners usually come around to sooner or later. So the first job was to take off the old antifoul, which was taken off first initially with the jet washer. So a week after we were hauled out, Spain went into lockdown, and a lot of the cruisers who were working on the boats at the time returned to their home countries, which meant that the boatyard became eerily quiet. Quiet, that is, except for the fishing boat next to us, where a guy would turn up on occasions to work on his old wooden fishing boat. Although this was fascinating in itself to watch, to see how an old fishing boat was constructed, it did mean that very often we were covered in a cloud of sawdust and general boatyard grime, which meant that we had to wash the hull down almost on a daily basis, just to keep it free from any contaminants. So once all the washing down was done and we got rid of most of the residual antifoul, it was time to sand down and key the epoxy layer below. Because of the lockdown, it was very difficult to leave the yard to get any protective equipment, and on the rare occasions that we could, a lot of the equipment, such as dust masks, was sold out, and this meant that the job was even more dirty and grimy than what it usually is. Someone did actually send us some masks from the UK, but these went missing in the post, so we just had to make do with the stuff we had on board.
When we were sanding underneath the boat, we couldn't find any masks anywhere, and this is what we've got from maybe a few years ago. It's really past its sort of day, really. It's like there's loads of grime in there, and this is with, you know, the elastic's gone, and that's the only mask we had to use, because you can't buy masks anywhere now because everyone's buying it for the coronavirus, but they would be really handy. We had them for sanding really toxic stuff. They need to move the chocks so we can do underneath them sanding and painting, so they kind of move one and don't put another one in its place, but just move it along. The kids are all on the boat, but apparently that's fine. Yeah, it's been really windy recently. This is probably a good day to do it because the boat's not shaking like it normally is, but it's still a little bit freaky.
The first job we did was to clean the hull, and even though this might sound counterintuitive to do this before the initial work started, and I don't even know whether it makes a difference, but we didn't want any abrasive cleaning fluids to run down on the freshly painted antifoul. And on occasions we did have a little bit of help from Nick, which is the son of one of our Russian friends from Siberia, who were also locked in the yard. So while the hull cleaning was going on, I had the task of repairing some of the epoxy problems that we'd had below. The green Gelshield epoxy layer, not to be confused with the gel coat by the way, hadn't adhered properly, and when we were in Tunisia, something had obviously gone wrong in certain patches, which meant they were coming off in little bits.
So Woody's job today is the continuous job of filling up with epoxy filler all the defects in the Gelshield. So he's filling that all up, and then we can sand it and clean it, and then put a nice coat of new Gelshield on.
This is a two-part epoxy filler, and it's to fill all of the little scratches and dents in the Gelshield which we had put on about 1.5 years ago. So I've got to go through the whole boat and find and fill all these little holes that have appeared, that the Gelshield didn't actually attach to the gel coat in some areas, and it's resulted in kind of a bubbling. At first we thought it was osmosis, but there's no bubbling on the gel coat itself. It's just between the Gelshield layer and the gel coat, so something obviously got in there when the layer was actually being applied. So now I'm going to have to go over with epoxy filler over all those tiny little gaps in the Gelshield and fill it, and then we're going to put another layer of Gelshield over the top. But it's going to be a long job. So when we realised that lockdown was going to be extended and we were going to be in the yard a lot longer than we expected, we decided to make a few little changes. We've decided to raise the waterline. The waterline on the Hempels is a bit kind of skew-if, and I think the reason for that is when it's sailing, it's right, but when it's sat in the water, it sits with the back end a little bit in too deep. And what we found is when we're wintering for a few months, we've started to get it like some blistering over where the antifoul is. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the waterline at the back. So incrementally, for every 1.5 meters, we've raised it 1 centimetre to the back. And we're going to raise the red boot line and we're going to raise the antifoul with it. So hopefully when it's sat in the water next time, the waterline should be absolutely parallel with the water.
So in the end we got our friend Werner to come and do the lines because he's the professional and he's very good at it as well, as you can see.
Werner was a full-time painter and decorator back in Belgium before he sold his business and became a full-time cruiser. He worked with us on a lot of those tricky paint jobs and I can't thank him enough really for all his help and advice.
In fact, it's almost as good as his guitar playing.
The thing is, with the original Amel sort of burgundy red, it's not an exact rail colour. So as soon as we're doing that, we've decided to do a colour match with the rub rail. So we're going to replace it with this closer match to a standard rail colour, which is 8024. We've got the Hempels polyenamel paint, and we're going to match the two lines. And it does mean that if we have any touch-ups to do anywhere around the world, we can just get a standard rail colour instead of trying to get a customised match every time. We've put a grey undercoat, and then we've gone over with 2 coats of the polyenamel. When you paint with a roller, you get these kind of bumps and you get this kind of almost corrugated effect. So we've sanded that back, which took some time, to virtually flat again, and then we'll do the final coat with a brush to get a more smoother and more sort of glossy finish. It's something you've got to be careful with is the 2 types of masking tape. One's a kind of heavy duty masking tape, which you get in most DIY shops, and it's kind of a whitey yellow colour, which is, as you can see on the lower line here. And then we've got the golden yellow tape, which is a more fine laser cut one, which gives a sharper line. So I'm going to use that as the top line because that's going up against the white of the gel coat on the hull. And the lower one, it doesn't have to be so accurate because I'm going to re-tape that off later when we do the 2-part epoxy underneath, and we're going to take it up to that waterline. You think painting a straight line on a boat would be easy. The boat is a very 3-dimensional shape, and the line isn't exact all the way along. It kind of winds out at the back. So it's as much doing it by eye as it is by measurement. So that tape has been on and off quite a few times, and it's not cheap tape. It's about €5 a roll. It's worth it to get the really good match, because if you get it wrong, it's going to look really weird. Luckily, the shop in the yard was still open, owned by Chris, and we could still get hold of paint and rollers and things like that, even though we couldn't get hold of any protective equipment. To be honest, if we were to redo this job, we'd probably spray paint it on rather than roll it and paint it. What's that?
Top of the bill.
Wow, Woody. Actually, this has gone back some time as the surveyor's report a few years ago pointed out a little bit of cracking in the gel coat around the chain plate. We checked the bolts on the chain plate and they were absolutely fine. But now we're in the yard and we've noticed some cracking along the rub rail as well. We thought we'd investigate a bit further. As always with jobs on boats, once you open up one job, it seems to cascade into other jobs. I'm going to have to take this rubber insert out so I can investigate inside. As soon as we took the rubber insert off, we discovered a lot more gel coat damage to the rub rail. So this is a kind of sacrificial rub rail, and it's been sacrificed, as you can see, with all of the gel coat repairs needed. Even though it's cosmetic, it's still pretty grim. A lot of cracking of the gel coat there, fiberglass stuffed in the rubbing rail. As far as I can tell, it doesn't go right through the fiberglass from what I've seen from the other side. But we need to take it off and investigate, and probably, well, definitely got to repair the gel coat. So we're going to take off this lower and take off the chain plate and grind out the gel coat damage.
So this rubbing strip has been an ongoing job really. We dremeled out all the cracks and I've been slowly filling it with gel coat. and it just takes forever because you just got to keep putting layers on. I've never done gel coat before, but I'm learning it. I've learned it over the last few weeks. It's just been quite cool. But now I think this is almost nearly the final coat, so I'm just now sanding it down and trying to get it as flat as possible and trying to keep this shape. So it's getting there. I think we're almost here on this bit now.
This is my top tip of this month, is if you've had masking tape in place for more than a couple of days, it sticks like glue and it's really difficult to get off. But if just a quick blast with a heat gun, it'll put it off just like it's a good metaphor.
Is it masking or masking?
Masking.
Do you mean masking tape?
I don't know why, it's masking.
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 Masking
As
tape.
in mask.
You can see it's quite cloudy today. We thought the cloud would be quite good because it means you're not really supposed to do it in a lot of sunshine, but if it rains then it's not so good. Okay, so this is the first coat of epoxy that we're putting on the bits that came off from last time. So it's those bits there we're trying to get.
We used a grey epoxy layer over the previous green epoxy layer, and then this meant if any damage to the grey layer appeared, we'd be able to see it quite clearly.
The good news is that we finally got round to doing the epoxy, and the bad news is that the weather forecast wasn't correct and now it's started to rain slightly, which makes us a little bit nervous because it's not good doing this in any kind of humidity. We just hope that it's all okay and this epoxy works.
And next was the antifoul layer. We put 2 layers on altogether, and we used Jotuns Seaforce 90. So a good 20 minutes of stirring got it all nicely mixed up and gloopy. There was a little bit left over after the 2 coats, so we put a 3rd coat around the waterline. We initially planned to do 2 separate colours, so if the first layer started to come away, we'd be able to see it. But as there weren't many customers going through the paint shop at the time, Chris wasn't willing to split 2 tins of 20-litre paint, so we ended up using the same colour for all the layers. The trick to doing the epoxy and antifoul layers is not to leave it too long between the coats, not to let it dry too much. The advice from Jotun was between 3 hours and 3 days depending on atmospheric conditions. So hopefully this should last us about 2 or 3 seasons. Behind the scenes there was a lot of drama going on, which I've left out in this video because I want to concentrate on the maintenance. But if you do want to see all that, problems with drones and police and the coronavirus in general, then check out the previous blogs.
It's gone very quick. Okay, so it's the morning and we're quickly trying to paint one more coat on the bottom of the keel, or Woody is, because they're about to launch us. I actually feel quite kind of emotional because, you know, we've spent all this time working on this boat and my hands are just raw. I've got no, the skins all come off just from working for 7 weeks non-stop, and here's our beautiful boat going back in. I highly recommend working on your own boat because you appreciate it a lot more.
And then we returned to the marina, still in lockdown, but with restrictions lifting, we could at least finish off those loose end jobs. And these mainly involved doing gel coat repairs. Even though it seems a simple job, getting a gel coat match is quite difficult, but luckily we still had Werner on hand with his expertise. So we finally got round to replacing the lower aft port side chain plate on the main mast.
Okay, we just degreased the outside shell coat after repairing it, and now Woody's putting in the nuts, and I'm supposed to hold this and fit it over it without touching because there's a lot of Sika flicks on it. It's up. Slowly, yeah. Go back. Okay, stop.
You turn, I've got no room to turn in here. Okay, next one. And also the rubber insert. But unfortunately we didn't get any footage of that because it was a very tricky job and there was lots of swearing. So doing the hull work increased our speed by about 30%. I mean, we were amazed at the difference it made. But the results speak for themselves, I think. So let's appreciate that new Waterline with some emotional music. So thanks for watching, and thanks in particular to our patrons who make these videos possible. If you would like to contribute towards the making of these videos for no more than the cost of a beer a month, and I do like the occasional beer, then why not consider becoming a patron by following the links in the description below.